Welcome to this video on ethical recruitment and informed consent in social science research, presented by Dr. Endris Abera. Ethical recruitment is a foundational part of responsible research. It dictates the level of trust, whether participation is voluntary, who is included, and how participants understand the study's purpose and implications. Ethical judgment is essential, especially in social science research, where recruitment often occurs within existing social, institutional, and cultural relationships. Ethical recruitment and informed consent are based on three global ethical principles. Respect for persons recognizes autonomy and protects against exploitation. Justice ensures fair selection and equitable distribution of benefits and burdens. Beneficence focuses on minimizing harm and maximizing benefits to participants and communities. Recruitment is ethically problematic when it involves misrepresentation, pressure from authority, selection based on ease of control, or incentives that distort voluntary decision-making. Ethical recruitment requires anticipating how requests are perceived by participants, beyond just the researcher's intent. Informed consent is an ongoing ethical process. It enables knowledgeable, transparent, and voluntary decisions, establishes trust, and protects participants from coercion, deception, and harm. In social science research, it creates an ethical relationship based on understanding, trust, and respect for autonomy. For consent to be ethically valid, participants must receive clear information about the study and alternatives. They must understand this information and retain the right to refuse or withdraw at any time. The decision must be made freely, without pressure or undue influence. Relying solely on signed consent forms is ethically insufficient. Signatures don't guarantee understanding, written forms can exclude those with low literacy, and participants may sign out of obligation. Ethical consent requires continuous communication, verification of understanding, and respect for changing decisions. Western research ethics emphasize individual autonomy, rooted in individualistic moral values. However, in the Global South, including Ethiopia, collective decision-making and familial ties often take precedence. Autonomy-driven informed consent may conflict with these relational concepts of personhood, indicating cultural limits to universal ethical principles. In many Ethiopian communities, personhood is relational, and communal well-being is prioritized over individual autonomy. Western informed consent frameworks may not align with local moral expectations. Consent may require consultation with trusted local figures, such as elders or community leaders, promoting trust and ethical acceptability. A study in Ethiopia found that participants were uncomfortable signing written consent forms, fearing legal accountability and limitations on expressing their true feelings. Limited trust in researchers was reported, and signed consent was perceived to encourage self-censorship. This suggests written consent can undermine openness and authenticity in certain sociocultural contexts. Voluntariness can be undermined by hierarchical relationships, social expectations of obedience, economic vulnerability, or cultural norms that discourage refusal. Even without explicit threats, perceived obligation can compromise voluntary participation. In Ethiopia, Yalunta combines moral obligation, deference to authority, and fear of social disapproval. A request from a respected person may be viewed as an instruction, making refusal feel unethical or socially unacceptable, weakening the voluntariness of consent. To strengthen voluntariness in contexts shaped by Yalunta, researchers must explicitly present refusal as acceptable and respected. They should use culturally appropriate and indirect communication, avoid group-based consent when possible, and provide private mechanisms for withdrawal. Ethiopian communication emphasizes indirect expression, avoidance of confrontation, and a respectful tone, which affects the clarity of informed consent and the interpretation of agreements. Ethical consent processes must adapt to these norms to ensure clarity and voluntariness without compromising ethical standards. Participant protection safeguards individuals from social harm, psychological distress, and breaches of privacy and confidentiality. This is crucial in research involving sensitive topics, marginalized groups, or politically and socially vulnerable populations. Anonymity means no identifying information is collected, which is often impossible in some research settings. Confidentiality means researchers know identities but protect them through secure data handling and restricted access. Researchers must clearly distinguish these concepts and avoid making unrealistic promises. Local social institutions, such as elders and community leaders, play a critical role in building trust and social legitimacy for research. They should be seen as ethical resources, rather than just administrative gatekeepers. Ethical research requires balancing community consultation and individual voluntary consent. Gatekeeper approval aids trust and access, but it must never replace an individual's right to make a free and informed decision about participating. Ethical consent must adapt to multilingual environments and diverse literacy levels. Best practices include meaning-based translation, oral explanations, visual aids, and avoiding technical or legalistic language that obscures understanding. Vulnerable populations in Ethiopia requiring additional safeguards include students, women, children, displaced communities, and persons with disabilities. Vulnerability stems from social position, dependency, and power imbalance, not inherent personal characteristics. Ethical research must navigate the tension between inclusion and protection. Overprotection can exclude marginalized groups, while underprotection risks harm. Balancing these requires continuous reflection, contextual judgment, and ethical flexibility. A conflict of interest occurs when a researcher's personal or professional interests influence their judgment, potentially skewing research conclusions. Common scenarios include instructors recruiting their students or economic incentives in vulnerable settings. Pressure can be applied through academic power, social authority, cultural norms of compliance such as yalungta, or inappropriate economic incentives. These pressures often overlap, eroding voluntary agreement. Mitigation strategies include separating evaluative and research functions, using independent recruiters, and including explicit non-penalization language in consent. Researchers should carefully design incentives and be reflexive regarding their power and position. Thank you for watching this video on ethical recruitment and informed consent in social science research.